Hello, everyone. Welcome to Food Integrity Now. I'm Carol Grave, and I'm the host of the show. And I have back on the show again today, Zen Honeycutt of Moms Across America. Welcome, Zen.
Thank you, Carol. It's great to be here, and thank you to your listeners.
Well, I'm always excited to have you on the show. You've been on my show several times, and Moms Across America is always doing great stuff. And we're always interested to hear what you have to say in the quest to transform our food supply, which definitely needs to happen. And you're doing it.
Well,
And
thank you. Thank you, Carol. It's great to be here and to be so in alignment with Food Integrity Now. You've been doing this for longer than Moms Across America has, and we so appreciate all of your excellent interviews with experts and researchers and farmers and scientists that impact the food industry. So we're thrilled to be here and to be in alignment with you to transform the food system and health in America and beyond. Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. Well, it takes all of us, doesn't it?
It does. It certainly does.
Okay, so Zen is the founding executive director of the nonprofit Moms Across America, which is a national coalition of unstoppable moms with the motto Empowered Mom, Healthy Kids. She is also an international speaker and the author of Unstoppable: Transforming Sickness and Struggle into Triumph, Empowerment, and Celebration of Community. And you can find this book, it's wonderful, on her website. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And Moms Across America's mission is to educate and empower mothers and others with actions and solutions to create healthy communities. And I'm thrilled to have you back. And I know one of the things that Moms Across America is doing is testing products and food. And Moms Across America was the very first to test glyphosate in America. And since
Yes.
then, it's been tested in several ways by Moms Across America in breast milk and other things. And along with doing school lunch testing, you can find those results on Zen's website. And most recently, you tested all the fast food restaurants or several of them, and those
Yes.
results were just abysmal.
Yes.
And if you haven't seen that, please go look at that and share that with everybody you know. So today we're going to talk about the latest testing that Moms Across America initiated. Zen, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So the tagline, the headline is that General Mills loaded cereal is loaded with dangerous levels of toxins. And we are particularly concerned about seeing this because for a couple reasons. And one is because General Mills has been a proponent of regenerative organic agriculture. They purchased Annie's Organic, and they have been, claiming on the boxes of these macaroni and cheese and different various cereals that they are promoting and supporting regenerative organic agriculture. And they continue to put out press releases saying that they are doing that. And yet, at the same time, they come out with this new loaded line of cereal. There's 3 different flavors. One of them is called Trix. It's a red food dye, little like pocket of a square pocket that has cream inside the pocket. So it's like frosting inside of a red food dye, highly processed, wheat cereal that claims to have vitamins in it. And so it looks like it's supposed to be healthy, but in fact, it is loaded, with levels of heavy metals and agrochemicals that are quite concerning.
So Zen, you want to tell us a little bit about what you found out regarding those levels?
Sure. Yeah, the levels of toxic heavy metals present we tested 2 samples were 200 to 400% higher than the EPA levels in drinking water. That's actually just of cadmium and sorry, one second. The other one, I believe it was cadmium, and I'll get the other toxic metal in a second. Cadmium and
Maybe you could
arsenic.
share your screen on this so people could.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
sure. Yeah, so cadmium and arsenic were 200 to 400% higher. And you can see that on my screen now. And aluminum levels, which is not considered essentially, by most people, a toxic heavy metal at low levels. So it's classified differently. But aluminum levels were 1,365 to 1,650% higher than what the EPA allows in drinking water. Yeah, and these aluminum levels, now to be fair, aluminum can be found naturally in the soil and in the environment, and it is believed that aluminum is processed better than arsenic and cadmium, which are highly toxic, and there's just no safe level. Cadmium especially is very carcinogenic. And so those you can see the levels for arsenic should be less than 10 parts per billion, and cadmium should be less than 5 parts per billion. And the levels found here, you can see arsenic was 23, cadmium was 22, and arsenic again was 21 and 23. And there was some lead too, 8 and 7 parts per billion. Those weren't extremely high, but still concerning. There's no safe level of lead. And then the aluminum, of course, you can see is 2,930 and 3,500 parts per billion found in these 2 samples. And according to the EU, there's only 1 milligram per kilogram per kilogram of body weight per week that a person should consume of aluminum. And if you calculate, we had a scientist and a toxicologist do this for us, okay? If a child eats an average of 40 grams of Trix Loaded cereal daily, the weekly consumption of aluminum would be 0.98 milligrams per kilogram per week for these samples, and they're both basically equal to 1 milligram per kilogram of body weight per week. When there's sampling errors and analytical errors are taken into consideration. So therefore, these cereals are delivering toxic levels of aluminum to the children who eat them when they consume them on a daily basis. So we are extremely concerned about this, because this level of aluminum doesn't take into consideration all of the other daily exposures that a child is having. Carol, think about it. All these pouches, aluminum pouches of applesauce and yogurt and juices, Capri Sun and different types.
Cans, aluminum
canned
cans.
foods, fish in cans, tomato sauces that are in cans that are highly acidic. These types of foods, we have not tested them. We would love to have just $1 million a year to test like crazy, but we've not tested them. But we can assume that there will be aluminum in the foods that are in aluminum packaging and cans. And so that would therefore amplify the amount of aluminum that a child especially is considering, consuming per week.
Then my naturopath, in my recent visit with her, I had high levels of aluminum, and she is just telling me that everybody she tests has high aluminum right now. So these kids are starting their day, mostly children, with this high level of aluminum. And again, like you said, it doesn't take into account all the other levels, all the other places where they're getting aluminum. So this is really, really concerning.
It's very concerning. And as you can see in the screen I'm sharing right now, and for those of you that go to momsacrossamerica.org and go to our blog, it's the top blog right now. Dr. Christopher Exley is a renowned scientist and aluminum expert, and he has said that severe debilitating autism is a consequence of brain damage, and damage to the brain is invariably inflicted during the first months after an infant's life. It may also happen in the womb, and susceptibility to brain damage will be significantly influenced by genetic factors. However, as in Alzheimer's later in life, toxins are responsible for brain damage in infants, leading to autism, and the leading toxic candidate to date is aluminum. So high levels of aluminum in these cereals, and there's many studies that we have quoted in these articles, are a serious concern to contributing to autism and Alzheimer's. And the public should know about this, Carol. This should be on mainstream media, because millions, I don't even have the stats on here. I'm sorry, we don't have the stats on here. Millions of people are now struggling with Alzheimer's. millions of children and young adults are struggling with autism. And the predictions are by the year 2032, 1 out of 2 of the children born will develop autism if we continue with the environmental exposures at the level that we're exposing our children and our mothers to now.
Yeah.
So we're extremely concerned about.
I'm deeply concerned about this. And next week I'm interviewing Dale Bredesen again, Dr. Dale Bredesen. He is the #1 expert in the world on autism. And he's written books and stuff on it. And it is a big contributing factor to Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, all those neurodegenerative diseases. So it's very concerning.
Yeah, we had a Moms Across America supporter tell us at one of the recent conferences we were at, Children's Health Defense Conference, that as a preschool teacher, she is extremely concerned for America's population, because she teaches a class of 13 children and 12 of them are on the spectrum. 12 out of 13. She said, Zen, I'm pulling my hair out. I can barely teach. I've got to find a different job. This is just not, this is not what teachers signed up for. They are not trained in how to manage special needs children at that level. And this was not a special needs class. This was a regular preschool classroom. And so I fear that these numbers of, 1 out of 36 children are outdated numbers, and that the CDC or, other maybe mental health organizations might even be classifying learning disorders and behavioral and learning disorders in different ways.
Yeah.
Sort of like how they used to call SIDS, now they're calling it something else.
Yeah.
So that those numbers don't, look, don't make people look bad. I don't know who the CDC or certain organizations. So I'm very concerned about the actual numbers and the reality of autism in America. And of course, we all know that Alzheimer's is skyrocketing. And it doesn't get any better when our elderly folks are eating highly processed foods that can contain these heavy metals, pesticides, food dyes, and preservatives. It's a true health epidemic in America. And I want to make sure to point out that it's not just physical health, it is mental health that is really putting us at risk, because when we have mental health issues, and the stats that are 10 years old, again, that I know of, 1 out of 5 people have a mental health disorder in America, 1 out of 6 children have a learning disorder. Those numbers, I think are outdated, and also put us all at risk, because even if you don't feel that you have a mental health issue, your babysitter could, your child's teacher could, the person driving in the car next to you could on the freeway. And it puts, our presidents could, our politicians, our policemen, right? These are all included in those numbers of 1 in 5, which I think is probably more like 1 in 2 or 1 in 3 now. That's just my guess. And so that puts the future of our country at risk. This is a national security issue. And this is according to, the generals of our militaries have been saying for years now. Since 2018, we quoted one saying that the school lunches in particular, and so we'll just say the food supply is a national security risk, because the candidates that are applying to be in the military cannot be accepted. They're either obese, or they have health issues like diabetes, or they have mental health issues. So they cannot be accepted. So we have a depleted military. And we have a decline in the capacity of our children to perform in school, which means a decrease in our ability to perform as a superpower in America.
Yeah, exactly. And recently, I know you're familiar with this, but I have his name here, Gary Pilnick of Kellogg's, suggested that consumers dealing with the high cost of food eat cereal for dinner. And so think about people eating Trix Loaded for dinner, for example. Yeah. Not only as a breakfast food, but we're going to be eating this toxic food for dinner instead of organic fruits, vegetables, grass-fed meat, the things that we know that is beneficial. And his quote was, "We got to reach the consumer where they are. So we're advertising about cereal for dinner." He said in his message, "This is landing really well with consumers who are spending more of their income on food than they have in the last 3 decades." And we know that's an issue, but eating toxic cereal for dinner is not the answer.
No, that comment is purely made because it's good for their profits. It's not good for the people of America.
Yes,
Eating cereal for dinner is not going to support, especially children, with the nutrients that they need to have their brain functioning properly. And, we didn't have the money this time around to test for vitamins and minerals in this cereal. But when we tested fast food, we found out that the levels of vitamin Bs were so low. They were non-existent vitamin B9 and B12. But vitamin B3 was so low that one would have to consume 333 Chick-fil-A sandwiches if they were a woman to get their recommended daily amounts of vitamin B3, and 380 if they were a man. I would love to be able to test the vitamin levels in this cereal. They do advertise with 12 vitamins and minerals, 17 grams of whole grains per serving, and a good source of calcium. I'd love to be able to look into that further, because vitamin Bs are incredibly important they're essential for the prefrontal cortex development. And when parolees, criminals, and serial killers have been tested, they've been shown to be deficient in vitamin B. And that meant that their prefrontal cortex was not functioning to capacity, and they were not capable of making good decisions the way somebody who is properly nourished could potentially make. I'm not saying that that's the reason for their decisions, but that is across the board, by people like Barbara Reed Stitt, who is the author of Food and Behavior: A Natural Connection. In her 20-year studies, Lifetime Achievement Award winner, has found that across the board, parolees, criminals, and serial killers are deficient in vitamin Bs, and that affects their ability of their prefrontal cortex to develop. So what we need is cereal that's loaded with nutrients, not cereal that is loaded with toxins. And it's about time that the CEOs of these corporations take into consideration what they're putting out there and how it affects the future of America.
I totally agree. So besides the heavy metals, what else did you find in the cereal? How about glyphosate?
Yeah, so we did find levels of glyphosate that were concerning. They weren't super high. They were 15.83 and 17.47 parts per billion, but that is 158 and 174 times higher than has been shown to cause sex hormone changes and organ damage in animal studies when these animals consumed glyphosate herbicides. I want to point out that is the full formulation, of glyphosate herbicides, but that's what's sprayed on the crops, right? Is glyphosate herbicides. And so when they consumed the glyphosate herbicides at the level of 0.1 parts per billion for 2 years, they showed sex hormone changes and kidney and liver damage. And that's a Seralini study out of France. That is a very important finding to show that even very low levels of glyphosate can be harmful to animals. Of course, we haven't seen the same exact studies on humans, but there have been many, many studies on testing the glyphosate levels, for instance, in pregnant women, and then, testing and following the babies born afterwards. And the women who had higher levels of glyphosate in their urine when they were pregnant, that those children had higher levels of the rates of autism and other types of neurological problems. There were higher rates of prenatal births. There were higher rates of miscarriages with the higher levels of glyphosate. There were higher levels of birth defects. Sperm has been known to be damaged by glyphosate in 4 different ways, the form and the function and the quantity and the quality of the sperm. We all know, well, maybe not all of us, but many know that young men today have 50% of the level of sperm, the viability of sperm that their grandparents did. And there's also a recent study out by Dr. Shauna Swan showing that when pregnant mothers were exposed to glyphosate, their female baby girls were androgenized. And they identified this because they measured the distance between the anus and the genitals. It's called the anogenital distance, and it was longer in women, in baby girls that where the mothers had been exposed to glyphosate, and that is a masculine, more masculine trait. And so, we're concerned about the reproductive organ, damage and changes to reproductive organs, which we don't know how that'll affect hormones, and we don't know how that affects, sexual identity or reproductive ability or the production of hormones that may drive them to procreate or not procreate. We do know that chemicals such as atrazine, when exposed to frogs, were shown to cause them to be either hermaphrodites, having both body parts and want to mate with both sexes, or to be homosexual, or to be asexual and not mate at all. And many of them actually grew ovaries. So we know that these agrochemicals can impact sexual behavior and perhaps identity. I don't know. We can't ask a frog about their sexual identity, but it does concern us that glyphosate has reproductive organ impairment and changes that have been happening, in addition to cancer. Carol, we all know about cancer, and we know about liver and kidney disease, and liver disease happens when glyphosate is present at very low levels. It's like, I think 3 or 4 parts per billion per kilogram per body weight, is very low levels. So the levels of glyphosate were also very concerning.
Wow. Well, most of my listeners and your listeners probably are not eating Trix for breakfast.
Right. Yes.
So what would you like to say to our audiences? What can they do with this information? Is there an action plan or something they can do?
Yes. Well, we have sent the information to General Mills directly. So we didn't actually make a petition this time and ask lots of people to contact them. You could do that. But we are particularly focused right now on politicians, because really, when it comes down to it, if the policies are not changed, these manufacturers will not do anything. And we believe that there must be some of our elected officials that we put in office that have children with autism, right? Or a parent with Alzheimer's, or is concerned about those things within their own health, that might actually do something about this. So at the bottom of our article, we do have a link to how you can contact your senator or representative, and we hope that you will click on it, just copy and paste their email, and send them an individual personalized email saying, hey, I'm concerned about the levels of heavy metals and pesticides and toxins found in foods such as Trix Loaded cereal by General Mills. And I'm asking you to have the political will, to have the courage to require the USDA to set standards and parameters around what is allowed in the food supply. And it's just essential that this happens. I also want to mention that we found 8 pesticides that also in Trix Loaded cereal. And one of them is called, I might not be saying it, but flopyram 1, a fungicide that has been shown to cause endocrine disruption in humans and wildlife at very low levels. And so, of course, endocrine disruption, it impacts the entire body, the entire nervous system. It's not just your reproductive organs. It impacts things like your mood and your ability to focus, and how your organs function. So that's very concerning. And then pyperonyl butoxide is an ingredient that is used in lice shampoo to facilitate the killing of lice.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's kind of like a surfactant. Like, it supports, it doesn't kill pests directly, but it supports other chemicals, like I would imagine, like flopyram or other types of pesticides, to be effective. And so that can't be doing anything good, when it's increasing the harmful impact of pesticides in our body. And this is why we're so concerned about the 8, total pesticides, because there's no synergenic testing done or required by the EPA to see what happens when 8 different pesticides are in a food ingredient or in water or in the environment and the impact on human beings. I mean, for example, we all know that when you put vinegar in a volcano in second grade that has baking soda in it, it bubbles and fuzzes and comes out like lava, right?
Right.
But we don't know what happens when you put 8 different, pesticides together. What is happening in the body are completely unpredictable, unforeseeable, and uncontrollable consequences. We just don't know what they are.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's pretty scary when you think about the amount of toxins that we're feeding our children, and the things that we don't know what it's doing. Like you said, the combination of the synergistic effect of all of them. So, yeah, it's very, very concerning.
Yeah, and I think it was Jane Goodall that summed it up pretty well. She said, "Whoever thought it was a good idea to spray poison on our food?"
Yeah,
Like some
simple as that. We got to quit putting poison and spraying poison on our food.
Yeah.
Well, we're doing our best
Mhm.
to get the word out, and so go to Zen's website, momsacrossamerica.org, check out the blog and the recent article about contacting your representatives. Also, share this with your friends. I mean, I know people that probably will have this in their home, and so there it is.
Yeah. This
And,
is
education is key. That's why we're doing this work, because if you don't know, you're not going to change. So share the information as much as possible. And we have to do better for our children. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, and I just want to mention again too that a lot of people see this happy-go-lucky rabbit and this bright packaging and think, "Oh, it's a treat. I only do this once in a while. It's a treat for my child." I would like people to start seeing these types of highly processed foods. I don't want to just target Trix Loaded, but these types of highly processed food, not as a treat, but as a threat. Just put an H in
Good
there for
point.
health and say, these are a threat to my family. I don't love living and making decisions based on fear, but I think we have to shift what's going on in our brains when we see these types of foods from thinking that they're a treat to a threat in order to preserve, our health and for our body's sovereignty and the ability to function. Because when you put in just a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit there, just imagine a cup. All of a sudden, that cup is flowing over, and those are toxins that are getting they're coming out through gut dysbiosis, through your gut, little holes. We've all, most of us now have some form of leaky gut, holes in our small intestines because of these toxins in the food supply. And
Yep.
then those toxins get out into our bloodstream and our bodies and cause inflammation and all kinds of chronic disease and cancer. And all you have to do is talk to any pediatrician now, any doctor that I have ever talked to anytime recently. They are extremely concerned about the numbers of autism and cancer and chronic disease and inflammation. It is just, we definitely have a health crisis in America. And until we find out what the reality is, that's why we test. We can't do anything about it. So we appreciate the support of you getting the word out and of your listeners and sharing this type of information with people, because until, as Maya Angelou says, unless we know better, once we know better, we can do better.
Right.
Right. And so this is sharing this information is a part of empowering your friends and family to know better and do better. And we absolutely can do that.
Right. I also love the work that Moms Across America is doing with all the testing, because I think these are so impactful when people can see the actual results. And if anybody out there wants to contribute to Moms Across America and you have the means to do so, please do that, because there's so much more testing that needs to be done, and it is so expensive to do this. And
Yes, it is. It
so,
is so
I
expensive
mean,
to
if
do
every
this.
one of the listeners today donated $10,
Mhm.
that would be fantastic.
It would be
And
huge. And we could test probably, I can't promise which ones it would be, but we would probably end up testing some of your favorite foods that you eat on
Yeah.
a daily basis. That's what we're going for. We're going for the biggest impact
Yeah.
that we can make. This is a new cereal. I know it's maybe not the most popular cereal on the market, but with that name, Loaded, we had to see whether or not it was loaded.
That's loaded, all right.
Yeah, it is loaded. Yeah.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
thank you, Zen. Keep up the great work, and thanks for being a guest on Food Integrity Now. And to our listeners, thank you for your continued support and sharing this and contacting your representatives. It's going to take all of us. And to our listeners again, that next week I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Dale Bredesen, The End of Alzheimer's. He has a program that not only can prevent Alzheimer's, but reverse it. And it's just fantastic information. So stay tuned for that. And if you haven't subscribed on the website, go to foodintegritynow.org and join us. And we promise not to inundate you with emails. We'll send you an email when a new article or interview comes out. So thank you again for all your support. And Zen, thanks for all the great work that you do.
Great pleasure. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.